Good morning, cool Patriots. It's Chris Cordani here. No, this is not our Halloween special, and I'm not Tony dressed up as Chris, but Tony will be in very soon. He will be in and on the mic in just in a little while. But I do have Karen Turk with me as always on Tuesdays. Welcome, Karen.
Good morning. Wake up, Patriots. It's really good to be here. I escaped the storm in Florida. Thank you so much for all of you that have asked. I was in the locals chat this morning with the great Ed Henry, and he stayed behind in Florida. So he's riding out the storm in West Palm. And thank God it doesn't look like it's going to be as bad on the East Coast, but it looks like the West Coast, Chris, is really in for it.
Well, it's not going to be very good here. We see, first off, the big news is Milton Milton was weakened to a Category 4, but that still doesn't mean that people should not evacuate, and it does not mean it's any less danger because the apparently what you're telling me here and what I've been finding out, you sent me something very
I
interesting
did.
here from X.
Yeah.
It winds up
Yeah.
it's a unique storm because the eye is thinner than most.
Correct. And based on volume and the capacity of the Earth's atmosphere to produce a storm, and I know this is a rabbit hole, but this is what I do. I ended up doing a bunch of research, and I was on X yesterday, and a very smart meteorologist that I follow put on the mathematical statistics of the chance of a storm like this. But even more so, if you look at the physics of all of it, what the atmosphere is capable of producing, this storm at its highest point is actually pushing the mathematical limits of what a hurricane can produce under these conditions. I mean, this is not anything that we've ever seen before. I've been in Florida for, I don't know, close to maybe 23, 24 years now. And I remember Andrew, that was right before I moved down. I went through Francis, I went through Wilma. I wrote out a lot of storms that were really bad storms, some of them that hit in South Florida. I had no power for 10 days with Francis. And I thought that that was as bad as it could get. But these storms that we're seeing now, look at Helene and look at this, it does have to make you wonder. And again, rabbit holes are my thing. Weather manipulation, it is a thing. I'm not saying that they're flying some airplane into this and doing something to manipulate it to make it worse. But the reality is that we are manipulating the atmosphere. I'm not blaming it on climate change. I'm blaming it on actual studies and things that have happened that maybe somehow are impacting us. I mean, you don't really know everything about our physical reality, Chris. And when you look at some of the things that are being studied in terms of quantum physics and other things that could be conditional on what happens in our Earth's atmosphere, it's pretty spooky.
Well, it is, and not only that, we're seeing a hurricane according to this meteorologist you've pointed me out to here, and this man's brilliant. He's saying it's the fourth
It's brilliant.
strongest hurricane recorded in recorded history as far as intensity is concerned. So, what he's also saying here is the eye is very thin. You're going to see winds as of yesterday. They may have weakened a little bit, but I'm still not sneezing at 180 miles per hour winds, and that means gusts could be even worse. And he explains that they could have gotten up to 200 in a Category 5. It's still going to be very fast, and it's going to be like the eye is going to be like a bulldozer, if you will.
It is. And Patriots, this is Noah Bergen. If you're not following him, I highly recommend that you do on X because as far as storm coverage, he really is spot on, but he goes into really in-depth detail. A lot of meteorologists don't. They just parrot what they've heard before. He does the research, folks. So if you want to know what's really happening, follow him. Of course, if you're in Florida, you're already following Mike's weather page. He's another forecaster that does a really good job. But he doesn't go down the rabbit hole the way that Noah Bergen does. And what I like about Noah Bergen is he's already answering the question that I'm thinking about. Like as a Floridian, I'm like, it's never been this bad. Why is it this bad? Why all of a sudden are hurricanes being developed in the Gulf of Mexico when historically, if you'll remember, Chris, these things come off the coast of Africa?
A lot of them
I've
do.
never
Yes.
seen something develop and go from a 1 to a 5 within the Gulf of Mexico. And now I don't know everything about the jet stream and how all of this works, but as a layman, this is a very curious thing. And he did this math of all of the spaghetti models for like 180 years. And out of all of the hurricanes that we have on a seasonal basis, which there could be named storms that you never even hear about, he looked at this and like, it is almost statistically impossible that this hurricane could happen. So what is the factor? And is it biblical proportions? Is it just the next big biblical event that we've now come upon, and is this supernatural? Or is it something more? Is there some sort of a conspiracy theory that we should be all concerned about? Is this the October
It's a natural shift in weather.
that
That's
are
what it seems to be.
asking themselves these questions?
It has to be a natural shift in weather because there was only a few years back we had those massive hurricanes where we were running out of letters. That happens sometimes, but yes,
Uh,
weather has been more intense. Could it's not about man-made climate change, as your Al Gores of the world are talking about.
no. I'm not saying that. I'm saying manipulation through other
Right.
factors,
Now, what I
things that
will
we are doing. I mean, there's this farm in cloud cover. We've got, we know that the Chinese, we know that they seed the clouds, that they create storms. When I was in China and I was in Beijing, the day that I woke up, I think it was the second day that I was there, all of a sudden the sky cleared. And we had asked the tour guide, and we were allowed to ask him certain questions on the bus with the door closed that we weren't allowed to ask him out in the streets. And we asked him, like, we don't get it. Like, the weather's so weird here. There's fog, there's smog, there's this and that. And the pollution is so bad that they seed the clouds so they'll get these beautiful days, but they actually create rainstorms there. So what kind of effect does that have on other storms? And you know what? If you want to go into the medical physical sense and the biblical sense, what factor does the energy of all the war that's going on, what energy does that put out that could be a factor in these storms, that things are more intense? I don't know. I believe in that sort of thing. So I think everything is energy. So,
one
if
thing.
we had peace in the Middle East, would this be any easier? I don't know. Maybe.
Well, one thing I believe, and I have to give you that in a few moments, as you can see in this video
So
here,
this is one of the
there are people
sandbag
there are
lines.
people preparing, and look at this. Look at the line for sandbags here in Tampa in St. Petersburg, Florida. And this is only one of the two, according to the guy driving this. But look how
It's
long this
rough.
line is. And this is like a minute long video, and I had to cut the middle of it to create it. So it's
Yeah.
it's a
It's
long one.
rough.
But people are getting ready. What I do know and what I do believe is people do need us and the entire nation to pray for them. And I do
Yeah.
understand you can help out with that today, Karen.
I mean, I can, and I have Jesus Calling ready. If I look down at my phone here and put on my reading glasses, so I can share it with all of you. But today is really good. Jesus Calling today is, I love you with an everlasting love. The human mind cannot comprehend my consistency. Your emotions flicker and falter in the face of varying circumstances, and you tend to project your fickle feelings onto me. Thus, you're not really benefiting from my unfailing love. You need to look beyond the flux of the circumstances and discover me gazing lovingly back at you, even under the worst circumstances. This awareness of my presence strengthens you as you receive and respond to my love. I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. Let my love follow you continually. Your need for me is as constant as the outflow of my love for you. So I think that's a really good way, Chris, to look at things right now when we're, looking at the dawn of this hurricane, and all of our friends in Florida, and our prayers going out to everybody that'll be affected. And this thing could take a path and go right up the East Coast and affect all of these areas in North Carolina that have already been devastated by Helene. And again, talk about unprecedented. I don't know about you, but in my lifetime, we've never seen a hurricane in the mountains. What happened there is just absolutely incredible.
It's going to get worse. And here's the path. Supposedly, it's going to tear right through Florida and go straight over, straight eastward. At least
I hope
that's the
so.
path it's in right now. And like you were
I
saying,
hope so.
a lot of these things you said before originated in East Africa, of course, but also much farther south than here. So you are seeing a lot of these originate, or at least get stronger farther north than normal. So that's another thing we should be looking at as well. One thing that does bother me, and it really does, is the way FEMA is going to respond to this, and the way
Oh,
the
yeah.
administration has been responding to everything here when it comes to disasters, or at least American disasters. We're not just talking about Hurricane Helene. The Biden administration's embarrassing, or let's just say a lackluster or nonchalant, virtually nonchalant response to the East Palestine train accident and the chemical spill was an indication of how they're going to handle things from here on out. And I don't see them doing well in Florida after this, even during election season.
Being on the ground for that derailment was absolutely incredible. I came back sick both times. I can't imagine the people that live there and that are still living there. And, you have a lot of people who grew up in that community, whose parents own the home that they're living in now, who, are people that enjoy their lives, that have children, that want to be in this community that they grew up in. It's just absolutely tragic. And they got no help from the federal government. It was absolutely unbelievable what happened there. The lawsuits have abounded, and they should, because in that sense, the people need some sort of recourse, and they're not going to get it from our government because they're not providing for the people that they're supposed to serve. And what I'm so shocked about too is, watching all of these, interviews with Kamala Harris and everything the Biden administration is doing. Not only is it appalling, and they are flat out telling us like, hey, we're communists, like, look at us, like, want to be a part of this communist regime. I mean, this is exactly what it is at this point. Oh, you're not a part of us. There's too many of you that don't believe in us. Well, we're going to ignore you, or we're going to cancel you, or we're going to prosecute you. I mean, that is absolutely communism, Marxism, dictatorship, whatever you want to call it. It's un-American. It's absolutely not the American way. And not once do I see any of these people coming forward, which is such a simple thing, and say, well, we're listening to you. You never hear them say that they're listening to the people. What is going on? I mean, if they're really behind democracy and they think that the Republicans are a threat to democracy, why aren't they saying like, well, we're listening to the people and this is what you want? They're not saying that. They're creating issues with no basis and basically saying either listen to us, or we're going to prosecute, persecute you, or ignore you when you need help and you're in trouble.
There you go. No basis. We're going to say it
None.
without evidence. That's the term we're going to be using. That's the media's term for Republicans. But Democrats, when they present things without evidence, nobody ever says that. We're going to do it. So without evidence, they make these accusations. We're listening to the people. They're not listening to anybody. What they are doing is doing something they've been doing culturally for the last 50 years, destroying the country from within. And by tearing down statues, dumbing down the history books with zinstery, if you will. They're dumbing down our education system as a whole. That was destroying the country culturally from within. You see what happened with Hollywood, the devolution of our entertainment, and not that could have been possible, I thought, but now you have the government that sits in there now, deliberately allowing the destruction of a lot of the infrastructure of the inside of this country in certain areas, at least.
Yeah. I know. And Kristen, I know you're an 80s buff, you're an old school radio guy, you've been in the entertainment business forever. And I really feel what you're saying, and I'm empathetic on it, because I feel the same way. As I have this sort of feel of loss. I don't like to watch mainstream entertainment anymore. I was always a Broadway kid. I was a theater geek growing up. I thought that my adulthood was going to be enjoyable because I was going to be consuming this content, of actors I loved and things that were going to be iconic. And now you look at everything, it has a woke agenda. It's really hard to have the same feelings about it. I want to say that Universal 23 is in the Rumble chat and brought up that, KGP walked out of the press room yesterday. After being pressed about the FEMA money. So I know that you were all over that.
That sounds like a cue, if ever I heard one, Karen.
I knew. And when I saw it, I was like, I know this is on the list, so let's go. Always on the same page with the chat.
Yeah, let's do it. In fact, I'll get that going right now. Here it is. Karine Jean-Pierre and Peter Doocy. By the way, these two should get a room, I believe.
President Biden is fond of saying, show me your budget and I will tell you what you value. If he's got money for people in Lebanon right now, without Congress having to come back, what does it say about his values? There's not enough money right now for people in North Carolina who need it. That's not misinformation.
Wait, no, that is your whole premise of the question is misinformation, sir. What you do? Yes, it's misinformation.
Is there money to send to Lebanon right now?
I just mentioned to you that we provided more than $200 million to folks who are impacted in the area, and I just shared with you that people are deciding not to. People are deciding not to. Not wait.
To Congress that there's not enough money to help people.
We're talking about the SBA disaster loan.
That's money for people in North Carolina,
and that's important. And people in North Carolina need that. Wait, this is nothing new. Peter, this is nothing new. Congress comes together, they provide money, millions of dollars for disaster relief. We're asking them to do the job that they have been doing for some time.
From a letter that President Biden sent to Johnson, McConnell, Schumer, and Jeffries. The president's letter is not misinformation. Would you agree?
No, the way you're asking me the question is misinformation. There is money that we are allocating to the impacted areas, and there's money there to help people who truly need it. There are survivors who need the funding. who need the funding.
You can't
And
call a
it's
question
there.
that you don't like misinformation.
I said
That's
that,
very
I actually said, we have the money
Now she's getting mad.
available to help
Can we put a
survivors of
raincoat on her
Hurricane
and
Helene
drop her in the
and
North
also
Carolina mountains so
Hurricane
she can
Milton.
see what people are dealing
Now-
with? I mean, I'm just so
Well,
infuriated.
Now, there's going to be a
Well,
shortfall.
that's because she's building
right?
an
Because we don't know
economy
how
from
bad
the
it's
middle out and the
Hurricane
bottom up.
Milton is
That's
going to
what
be.
she's going to say down there.
And so
That's it.
we're going to need additional funding. We're going to need additional
That's
funding.
exactly what I just asked about. And you said it was
No.
misinformation.
What
Yes.
you're asking me is why Congress needs to come back and do their job. That's what you're asking me. Congress needs to come back and
Holding
do
up-
their job
holding it
and
up.
provide
Gotta get out.
extra assistance, extra funding to disaster relief fund. That's what Congress needs to do, and we're going to continue to urge that. You may not want that, but that's okay. That's what this president wants, and that's what the vice president wants. Thanks, everybody.
The idea is blame Congress. Now they're trying to shift the
I'm
blame to
just so
Congress.
appalled that none of these people get on the ground in these disaster areas during any of these storms. Like, you're out there and you're campaigning, you see Donald Trump do it, but these Democrats just don't get it. It's such an obvious showing that they do not care about other people. They're all elitists. They only care about themselves. Here she is, like, yeah, I'm serious. Like, put on a raincoat, go up there, see what's going on, hand out some food, and then talk about it in the press room. Nobody has a touch of what the reality is for real Americans anymore.
Didn't she just get promoted to special advisor or something like that, or
It's
senior
embarrassing.
advisor or something like that? That means the administration no longer wants her in the public eye. That's what it really means. But think about this. You're 100% right. These people on the left like to push their policies, their immigration policy, their let's just say their equity-based disaster relief policies, their other economic policies. They want to push them on the rest of the population because they don't have to deal with the consequences in their neighborhoods, in their little cocktail parties, in their little circles, in their bubbles. They don't have to deal with the crime that's going on thanks to increased illegal immigration, the gangs that are coming in. They don't have to deal with the people who, or the pickup and the cleanup as far as those who are trying to put their lives back together after natural disasters. When and we're not just talking about here, we're talking about East Palestine, Maui, and probably pretty soon Milton, which is going to be sad. You're going to see FEMA without funds because those funds were allocated, as you know, a couple of years ago, allocated to housing and caring and taking care of the illegal migrants, if you will.
There are so many things wrong. I mean, if you could go back, to the beginning of this, how quickly this administration took over and infiltrated our country, is unbelievable. Things have never moved at the pace that they have. And they did this very strategically, knowing that things were going to happen. And I'm not saying, again, that they're manipulating disasters, but it doesn't take a genius to predict that bad things are going to happen in our country. Unfortunately, Mother Nature is not kind, and they have not prepared for this at all because they are preparing for a global takeover on the behalf of the people that control them at the World Economic Forum and everywhere else. I mean, that's what this is.
You hit it right there.
Yep. It is. It's just they're parroting what they feel they need to say in order to elevate their careers selfishly and to get to that next position. So I'm sure that KJP is very happy right now because she feels like she's, getting promoted. And you're right, she's probably likely getting demoted, and they're going to move another lackey in that, is new to the game. That's going to be even more of a puppet than she is.
Oh, well, she was a pretty bad puppet, but you really hit this on the
Thank
head
God
here.
we don't have a lot longer left, but I mean, maybe we do, depending on what happens with this election.
Let's just slap this right here. You hit the nose on the face right there. You did it. You actually said it. Here's the problem. The left, the Democrats in America do not care about this country. They're busy chasing instead of actually having to do their jobs and take care of the infrastructure. And I know the infrastructure bill's there, but that was about creating government jobs and numbers and trying to fudge the employment numbers. And also there's several poison pills. That's another story. But we're talking about the fixing the infrastructure after a disaster. They don't do that. They don't care about taking care of American people. They don't care about our education system as long as it's dumbed down.
They're not on the ground. They're not on the ground. They're not meeting these people. They're not even give two craps about them.
But they don't care.
Right?
They don't care about the economy runs as long as the numbers look good when they print the money. What they're really doing is chasing a national and global social agenda, and that's what they're telling you to vote for. They're not telling you to vote for competence. They're not telling you to vote for leadership.
Yeah.
They're telling you to vote for their national and global social agenda. And that's it. That's it.
They're telling you to fall in line,
Right.
get with the program, join the Nazi party, do it now. That's what they're telling you to do. I'm going to call it for what I see it as. That's what
But,
it is.
and
Fall in line.
I'm going to say something that's very unpopular. The Nazi party at least worked on did the nuts and bolts, did the actual they did the things that the government was supposed to do, as far as when you say the trains run on time, you understand that they don't run on time here in this country. I'm kind of
Wow.
I'm using that metaphor. This is a country that cannot or will not, now I'm not saying cannot, now will not take care of Americans after a disaster, and that they've shown this time and time again.
I'm
And that
certainly not a European expert, Chris, but what I do know is that in 1928 in Austria, they lost control of what they really had in their democracy, like we have in our republic here. And
Right.
what they lost that to was a party that was the National Democratic Socialist Party. This is pre-Nazi regime. This is like going back a little bit. We're talking 1928. This is before Austria was occupied by the Nazis. But what that did was that created an economic landslide. Does that sound familiar at all? And that
yeah.
economic landslide is what translated to having the weakness in the country of Austria that allowed the Nazis to basically come in and take power. Plus the fact that they brainwashed children, again, sounds familiar. And, my dad growing up there at the age of 11, when he escaped, he said as a child, it was very compelling for him that he, although he was Jewish and he loved being Jewish, and he understood that that was what he was born to be, and that he got that. He also said to me, I felt left out. I felt like I wanted to be a part of the Hitler Youth. Like, these people were praised. They were put on a pedestal. These children were admired. They were given praise by the people around them. And as a child, that's what you're seeking. And it was very difficult for me in my childhood. And he was very open about this. And I look at what's happening in this country now to our kids being brainwashed in our education system. And it is absolutely reminiscent of exactly the stories he would tell me growing up. And it's really spooky when you have a parent or a grandparent that told you direct stories about World War II and what happened and the atrocities where 6 million Jews were exterminated. And you look at what's happening, we're on the heels of October 7th. So I'm a little impassioned today. But bottom line is there's a lot of similarities, and it's getting really dark and really scary right now.
Yeah, and I don't want to fall in the trap of saying the left are a bunch of
No.
Nazis, but they are controlling. They're more they're Maoist in a lot of ways, because they're doing what the left what Mao did, systematically destroyed history. Didn't care about it. It kind of fixed up certain areas, didn't fix up other areas of the country until certain people fell in line. And generations later on, you had people not really understanding what Chinese culture was all about pre 1950s, and only understanding what the Mao Cultural Revolution did. That's what you're doing here. I want to do. I do want to get something. I want to get your thoughts on something before we get to Paul. Paul's coming really soon.
I was going to go down a Shen Yun rabbit hole with you about China now, but yeah, please go ahead.
No, Shen Yun is very important. I'm glad they're touring around the world, because what they're doing is showing the world. Yeah, they're showing the world what a lot of what Chinese culture was about before communism. They say it too in the promos. Before communism, there are a lot of good people out there.
They do show it, but it's still what's interesting about it. What I found fascinating about it, and again, you've traveled the world too, Chris, and you've also been exposed to a lot of news over the years, so you get it. But it really is still controlled in large part by China. It can never get away. It's like being in a mafia. So if you look at Shen Yun, as much as they are shedding light on some of it, there's some behind the scenes stuff that's really, really creepy there, because communism is creepy.
Hold on a second. Shen Yun is actually run by Falun Gong, the people from Falun Gong who are persecuted by the Chinese.
They are persecuted. You're right, and they are run by them. But there's also a line that they have to walk, Chris, in order to be able to do this without being killed and without being persecuted and without being really threatened, without their families being threatened. It's a very bad position that these people are in, and yet they take on the responsibility. Right. That's the point that I'm making, is that you're living under this umbrella of this mafia that is going to control you even when you escape, even when you get out, even if your family is a part of the Jewish population and you get out, the Nazis are still breathing down your neck. It's very hard to get away until we eliminate that threat, until we eliminate these terrorists, whether it be terrorists in China or terrorists in the Middle East. we are constantly be having to look over our shoulders, and
Well,
that's a really scary place to be.
we're letting them in, Karen, and that's another thing.
It's
Another
terrible.
another nail you hit right on the nose, because you're right. You're right. There are people from China and other countries having to watch their backs in this nation because
Yeah,
our nation, with its lax policies, lax immigration policies, are allowing Chinese secret police to roam around here. There and other nations.
absolutely.
It's around the world. It's not just America, but let's worry about our own borders. We have Chinese secret police. We have agents from other countries, probably like keeping an eye on some of the people seeking asylum here. But definitely, we know about the Chinese secret police here, and
Right.
this is something. These people are still getting persecuted, even
And
if
it's
they
about
escape.
brainwashing people,
Right.
bringing them into their terrorist,
And
regime, whether it be, people who are joining Hamas, or you look at, it's very similar, when you look at these kids that are marching on behalf of Free Palestine, and they don't know they're being brainwashed into terrorism. I mean, that's literally what's happening right before our eyes. We're seeing American kids buy into this, and we saw this in Afghanistan. Do you
right.
remember when we had these Americans that were joining the Taliban? And you thought, how is this even possible? Well, yeah, because it's mind control.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact,
Wild.
your favorite vice president had a lot to say about immigration. And
Ah,
by the way, all of these people that are coming in, the Chinese nationals from the secret police, they're probably claiming asylum too to make it easier, so they can just
yeah.
disperse throughout the country. But
Well,
I
and
don't have
they're
any paper in
infiltrating
my hand saying so.
organizations,
Right.
just like, the jihadists are infiltrating our Congress with the appointments of people like Talib, reality, like
Right.
it or not.
So did you know that during the Kamala Harris podcast and fluff interview love fest this week, she didn't expect to run into a real journalist. Apparently, 60 Minutes asked her questions, and she, as you can see from the face there, she was not really happy about that. But on immigration, let's hear what she had to say to 60 Minutes.
There was an historic flood of undocumented immigrants coming across the border the first 3 years of your administration. As a matter of fact, arrivals
Freeze up on you, Chris?
And solutions are at hand. And from day one, literally, we have been offering solutions.
what I was
Solution.
asking was it a mistake to kind of allow that flood to happen in the first place?
I think the policies that we have been proposing are about fixing a problem, not promoting a problem. Okay.
But
but
the
the-
numbers did quadruple.
And the
under
numbers
your
today,
watch.
because of what we have done, we have cut the flow of illegal immigration by half.
But should you
We have
done
cut
that?
the
Should you
flow
have
of
done that?
fentanyl by half, but we need Congress to be able to act to
There we go. She blames Congress again, and she tells you, get this, she tells you that the immigration numbers are half. Yeah, half of your administration's heavy influx numbers. Yeah, the law of averages says that many people from the beginning could not actually come in later on because there wouldn't be as much left. I mean, this
No,
is
they
not
don't care
their
about
doing.
statistics. They don't
Right.
care about actual numbers. They don't care about what's profitable. And you know what's really interesting is you actually clipped that right at the end. The last word that she said was act. And all I could think of is act. Yeah, you're acting. She has the same bullet points that she parrots again and again and again. It's like she sits in a room and they just memorize. They're like, here's the 12 things that you need to remember. So when somebody
Exactly.
asks you this question, you have these 12 sentences. And you can see her brain. I think it's amazing. You can see her brain actually processing them, Chris, as she's sitting there. Like,
It's true.
okay, let me go to sentence number 2 now. Like, you can see the wheels spinning. It's unbelievable that this person is actually,
Yeah.
just in the running to be the president of the United States. Like, I just can't wrap my head around it.
And this is why they had to avoid a primary or any kind of actual process, because there was no other
Mhm.
way she was going to get into that top of that ticket, or even anywhere even close to the Oval Office. As I said before, the Democrats could have 25th Amendmented Biden for a long time, but they spent 3.5 years propping this guy up, pretending he's still competent for one simple reason: because the vice president cannot do the job. That's the real reason. That's my thought. That's my opinion. I want to know what the Patriots think about that. And on that
No,
note,
and they knew
let's-
she couldn't do the job. And that's why they didn't diagnose President Biden with dementia at the very beginning, which was what I predicted, because a lot of us thought that. I mean, a lot of us thought, okay, they're going to get this guy in, they're going to diagnose him with dementia, he's going to be unfit to serve, and in walks Kamala, right? We all thought that was a possibility. Well, then that didn't happen. But the reason I believe that didn't happen is because they realized how actually essentially stupid this person was. And they were like, oh, we got a problem on our hands. We got a weekend of Bernie's this guy as long as we possibly can, because we don't actually want her to speak to the American public. And by the time we bring her out from the shadows, it'll almost be over and we'll figure out a way to manipulate everything, and steal the election yet again, if that's what they're intending to do. And I'm not saying they did it before. I'm just saying it's a possibility.
Oh yeah, I mean, they could have brought they could have done anything. They could have found a way to get rid of her and knock her off the ticket somewhere along the line, but they didn't. And they were talking about that too. But let's get off Kamala. Well, actually, we do have some Kamala discussion, and I want to bring in Paul Stone for this one from Colonial Metals Group. Paul, welcome to Wake Up Patriots.
Hey, good morning. Hi, Karen. Hi, Chris.
Hey,
we're
Paul.
happy to have you here. I'm glad you're here because we're talking about the 60 Minutes interview from that was aired yesterday or on Monday night on CBS. Kamala Harris decided to do this, and I don't think she was ready for the fact that there was that she was going to be facing a real journalist who would actually ask her real questions. She was kind of nuts, and
I didn't know there was one of those at 60 Minutes.
Yeah, I was surprised too. But you know what? Sometimes I guess the word's out. You're allowed to criticize, or you're allowed to ask her questions now. This is in the middle of that podcast fluff fest she's doing with the likes of Howard Stern and Stephen Colbert and that floozy chick from whatever show that call her daddy or something like that. But she was talking to 60 Minutes and dodged a very important set of economic questions, like how are you going to pay for your god awful policies? And I'm glad you're here, Paul, because I want to get yours and Karen's thoughts on on how. Well, let's just say the non-answer that Kamala Harris answered during the interview.
You want to expand the child tax credit.
Yes, I do.
You want to give tax breaks to first-time home buyers.
Yes.
Candy
and
and
people
soda.
starting small businesses.
Candy. Yep.
But it is estimated by the Nonpartisan Committee for Responsible Federal Budget that your economic plan would add $3 trillion to the federal deficit over the next decade. How are you going to pay for that?
Okay, so the other economists that have reviewed my plan versus my opponent and determined that my economic plan would strengthen America's economy, his would weaken it.
But
My plan, Bill, if you don't mind, my plan
I'm speaking.
is about saying that when you invest in small businesses, you invest in the middle class and you strengthen America's economy. Small businesses are part of the backbone of America's economy.
Karen, there's some of the lines she rehearsed.
I mean, all I
but
think to
pardon me, Madam
myself
Vice
is like,
President, the question was, how are you going to pay for it?
Well, one of the things is I'm going to make sure that the richest among us who can afford it pay their fair share in taxes.
Another one.
It is not right that teachers and nurses and firefighters are paying a higher tax rate than billionaires and the biggest corporations.
But
And I
another
plan
one.
on making that fair.
But we're dealing with the real world here.
But the real world includes,
How are you going to get this through Congress?
Sure.
when you talk quietly with a lot of folks in Congress, they know exactly what I'm talking about because their constituents know exactly what I'm talking
I
about.
don't understand, why does she have to talk to everybody like they're 3 years old and like they're completely brain dead? It's just so obvious that like I can't answer the question, so I'm going to become defensive and confrontational. It's like she's like a teenager. It's like when you're raising a teenage child and you ask them about their grades and the teacher has posted it wrong online. We've all had this experience, and the kid's like, but mom,
Yeah.
you don't understand. Like, she is so obviously unable to actually function without notes and a teleprompter, and she knows nothing about what's actually going on in this country. She's experienced none of it. She sat in her little ivory tower, and it's just, I'm so infuriated watching her. And then she talks to everybody in such a condescending manner, like they're so much stupider than she is. Well, like, let me explain it to you because you're obviously an idiot. That's the name of the game with her.
Well, Paul, let's talk about some economic realities of all of this.
Sorry.
Go for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, It's so sad. I know I'm not one of hundreds of millions of people that see this part clearly, and that's why I talk about it all the time, because it's so revealing to recognize that an idea to give someone money from your money that you have to pay the bills to run the country means you'll print the money you give away, which then causes everything for everybody to be more expensive. So if you aren't going to print their paychecks and increase their paychecks at the same rate you're increasing the money supply, you're drowning out, you're slaughtering the chance for 60, 50, 60, 70% of this country to enjoy its time here while they're alive. It's beyond, it's in a way, it's evil. You're making big moves that affect hundreds of millions of people's lives without scanning past the first couple of pages of your idea to actually see how it will affect things that are already in process, living, earning, bill paying, the cost of living. So to me, it's sickening, but Washington gets to do what it wants to do, what it's going to continue to do until it can't, because eventually we'll all be brought to heel by the realities of mathematics. And that's going to be one hell of a painful wake-up call. But we will get our country back, mathematically speaking, and that is a little bit of a prediction, but that's what I would think. We would get our country. The one thing that's actually ruining it is this gigantic government that thinks we need them.
That's true. As a matter of
Is that a
fact,
mic drop moment?
yeah, exactly.
I'm in the chat. I'm reading along here what's going on, and I'm also trying to follow some of these updates from the National Hurricane Center because there's a lot going on. But we have a lot of people in the chat that are sending prayers out for Trixie's daughter. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out and let everybody know that we are praying for her, in addition to praying for everybody that's going to be affected by this hurricane.
Yes, let's do that. Yes, of course. Prayers, definitely sending prayers out
Yes.
for Trixie's daughter. We're yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get into let's talk about this though too. You were Paul, you were discussing the big government and how they want to act like, well, we're going to definitely need them. There are ways to protect ourselves, but I do want to get into something that Karen and I talked about before, and we wanted to get your perspective on this FEMA money. All this money proudly going to illegals over the last couple of years has come to a head, because now the country says, or at least the Biden administration, Biden-Harris administration, or as I like to call it, the Barris administration, is saying, well, we don't have a lot of money left in FEMA now. We can't take care of Americans here. And I believe that's something, especially when Milton's coming around the corner, that's something that I believe Americans here listening, patriots should listen to, if in fact more Democrats are elected in the future that follow this same kind of mentality. What are your thoughts on all of this?
But just another thought would be that FEMA, long ago, if it had been a part of a government that had the mindset that Florida gets hurricanes pretty often, and Texas and Louisiana.
You mean
and
foresight?
within their construction, they would always have set aside a couple $billion. A couple billion. They're adding to the debt $1 trillion every 100 days. So $1 trillion is 1,000 billion. Can't they just have a few billion sitting in a fund that's just for Florida, Louisiana, and Texas? Look at the scale of this, right? $1 trillion in new debt is $1 billion bills every day. There's $1 billion that you're going to print within 100 days. So that's $10 billion a day, maybe forever. And the government couldn't just have a few. This is what I'd really rather point out. It's the failure of vision out of our government. And maybe history is showing most or all central governments suffer this ailment. They cannot see. They have no vision, but they have $1 billion to shoot off to Lebanon like that. And
right.
So it's disgusting, it's horrific, it's agonizing as hell that not only do we have to fight the storms that come and destroy, our place where we live, but we always have to fight the destruction the government is causing.
And that's important too, because this is
Right.
deliberate. I thought it was incompetence for a long time, but it just seems deliberate at this point. Because once they actually do something, then they face the consequences of what happens, as we're seeing with Helene and probably soon Milton. The money's not being there, and of course they really didn't do a very good job in Maui either. And I want to keep saying that. But
Oh, no, of course.
but
Where have they done a good job? Wait,
right,
let's do a show. We all have a week to do our research, all
and
three
they're
of us.
blaming
Next show,
everybody
we're
else.
going to list the
Mhm.
incredible things the government has actually done.
Right, and they're blaming everybody else though. They look, it's the
It's going to be
administration
a very
blaming
short
Congress.
show, Paul.
Right.
Yeah. Lots of commercials.
Hey,
It's gonna be
you
a
get a
very
hey
short
for that
show.
one.
Just gonna
All right.
basically, we'll just do a promo for Colonial, not Milton. Just call it a day.
Well, and that reminds me, look, here's something very interesting too. There are ways to protect ourselves from this horrible government spending oh God, irresponsible. I can't say horrible, irresponsible government spending, and I'm going to say deliberately irresponsible government spending at this point. Whereas, yes, they're inflating the economic numbers when it comes to printing money, but that's going to come to a head too. And I'm finding out that Goldman Sachs and a lot of other big time prognosticators, if you will, are saying gold's going to shoot up even more than it has been. How now we're not economic geniuses like the apparently the 16 economists that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden keep telling us about that seem to say, or the I guess the Nobel laureate economists that seem to say where that their plan is so brilliant. Now I'm telling you this, it's not working and it's not going to work in the future. So what are you seeing here with gold and precious metals?
I see it just continue to react to the pressures that come against it, which is a larger and larger pool of people, investors that demand they get gold and silver into their portfolio, which means there's just less left over for folks that want to come to gold and silver tomorrow. I really, it's very important for folks to get the awareness that we could easily run out of supply. Now, how expensive would it be then? We're so used to, well, I'll just get whatever I want when I want to. I mean, it'll be there. I just touch my little smartphone and I get what I want. Not with gold and silver. No. And you got to remember, and this is, would be helpful too to folks, is aren't central banks for to buy the gold as it comes out of the ground? Yeah. So where are you in line, right? When you look at how the government treats you, I don't even know if you're in line, right? You're just some butt of their joke when they're, look at these citizens complaining. I mean, they're the idiots that live where hurricanes come. I can just see that's the government's probably the mindset. Why don't we just give you a tax break so you can leave the red state of Florida and live somewhere else? That's probably how they really think that we should be dealing with FEMA funds, right? So when you think about your options, gold and silver is real money. I'm not calling it that. That's just what the human race has said about gold and silver for about 2,000 years until Nixon decided to create this little financial video game experience we're all living in today. But because that alternate reality draws on a resource that is limited as well, value in the dollar, when this charade ends, then are you going to be clamoring for gold and silver? You have to already be in it before, if history proves itself mathematically repeating again, this destruction really does come around the corner. And it comes around the corner when printing money isn't possible anymore because the dollar is just so worthless. You can't print fast enough. There's something I've realized, and I'll shut up, but in all of my years of looking at this scenario, looking at this segment to interacting with this giant government, this humanity that we keep losing because of that giant government, the more money you print, the less you have.
And that's true. And it does inflate the stock market. So when you see the Democrats here touting the stock market, how it's so wonderful, the Dow Jones, again, 30 handpicked stocks. I'm not even going to get into that. But you're looking at this. You're looking at the numbers here. Wow, they're so wonderful. The fact is, they're not accounting for the fact that the easing's been incredible. The printing of the money has been outlandish. But following all of this, and if you look at the numbers over the years during rough economic times, and I hate to say irresponsible ones too, gold goes up, precious metals go up, and there are reasons for that, Paul.
It's a squeeze play. It's just, if 100 people want 100 ounces of gold, then it's X dollars an ounce. If 1 million people want 100 ounces of gold, then it's, 100X higher than that. It's just a squeeze play. It's a trapped asset. And you got to think, with all the ground penetrating radar and just technological advances, and everywhere we've already dug and didn't find it, and where we're digging and finding it, that we'd get gold out of the ground faster. But on average, still, if you say, here's my new gold mine, it'll take 15 years on average for you to be producing gold, notable amounts of it. It's not a lake of metal down in the ground. Gold was riding on asteroids before as our Earth was just forming, was still a molten blob of rock. So shooting into the Earth's surface, it's in a vein. You have to cross cut a whole acre, or half an acre at a time, drilling a core down hundreds of feet, maybe every 2 or 3 feet away from each core, and take those samples and study as you look through the cylindrical earth that you've withdrawn from where you're digging, and see if, there's a piece of gold. And then you look at a map and see where that was when you're in your field of where you were drilling core samples. I mean, it's a hell of a lot of work. It seems like oil, you just stick a straw in the ground and out it comes. So people really need to understand it's one hell of a trapped asset. And if the world is covered with gold, or decent amounts of it, 70% of the Earth's covered by an ocean. So you're only going to be able to probably find 30% of the gold here on the planet. And that's if you dug up every square inch of soil on the whole Earth that isn't covered by ocean.
So you can't just stick a pan in the water and just shake it around and just see that's the
You can
that's
do
what I
little
thought.
There's
Remember those
all these
panning
like
things?
all these crazy UFO people are always talking about like the aliens coming here to mine gold, right, Paul? Because it's such a valuable asset. I'm not saying this is true, but you're talking about the oceans. So I'm like, that's a really good point. Maybe that's why the UFOs are going in the oceans now, because there's been some reports of that. They're going to get the gold. Like that, the ocean thing is incredible. In all seriousness, I would have never thought about just that fact until you said it. It's such an obvious thing, but yeah, 70% of the Earth is covered by water. So there's such a limited amount of what you can mine. I don't know that I had actually put that together before.
That makes a lot of sense, because you can't.
I love that you would say that, Karen, because most of us are inoculated and put asleep by our immediate access to things on a touchscreen device. That, well, when I want it, I'll get it. It'll be here tomorrow. It'll be here later.
I'll order
today.
it on Amazon. Yeah.
Right. And so that's just not the real world. That's the world flooded with money. That's just not the real world. Gold and silver reminds people of, this is the real world, right? And one of my old sayings is, life on Earth's kind of always going to be camping. For the last 20, 30 years, we've invented all kinds of comforts that take us away. We've
created a virtual reality, Paul. It's a virtual reality. It's not real. It's fabricated since the times of Nixon, as Chris pointed out. But like, virtual reality is what keeps ringing in my mind as you're talking.
Yeah, and I don't mean to lecture, and I just know what I've tripped over and looked to, been in seeking to try to understand. How is this like this, or is it different than it used to be? And it's just simply, you can kind of do whatever you want by spending a resource. You have time, you have energy, right? So how far could we hike without eating? 2 days, a week, right? Without eating at all, maybe a week, and we would just be exhausted and laying on the side of the road or the trail or whatever. So when you think about, how do we have this world today in Europe and in Asia and here, at the level that we can just kind of have all these conveniences, the resource that's being burned is the yen, it's the euro, it's the Chinese dollar, it's the American dollar. Every country is printing. Every country prints money that isn't real, that goes into a real system, which causes the system to no longer truly be real, because it's not running on a resource that has unlimited amounts of time and unlimited amounts of value. When you print gold, you can't. When you dig gold up out of the ground, it's real. It's always been real. You discover it. You can add it to the supply of things, but it doesn't cheapen the gold that's already in existence. When you print money out of thin air, it cancels out the value, deteriorates the value of money already in the system. So when you start thinking, there's an end to that, That's my point. And that's why gold and silver, because there's no end to that, historically speaking.
And again, silver, and we've said this before, gold and silver both have also have utility properties too. This is not just passing around just not passing around things for value or making jewelry. These two metals are very important to our daily lives. And let's throw copper in there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Real stuff has real purposes, and paper can't be money. It's what you wrote something on or wiped something on, but it can't be money.
Yeah, you can't
'Cause it
counterfeit
isn't
gold.
money. That's not
There's nothing tangible backing it,
perfect.
Paul. Like, there's
It's just
no
right.
reality to it. It's just
Well, that was
it's
the idea.
incredible that we've gotten to this point.
That was
Yeah.
the idea. And look, if people want to learn more about what Paul's talking about and Colonial Metals Group, log on to Ed Henry's Colonial Metals Group website, colonialmetalsgroup.com. That's colonialmetalsgroup.com/Ed-Henry. I'll read that one more time, colonialmetalsgroup.com/Ed-Henry, because a dash is longer, but it's the same thing if you're going to push it on there. You're going to learn a lot about gold, silver, and what Paul talks about here every week. Colonial Metals Group is also putting out a very interesting offer. First off, you can call them also at 800-805-4034. That's 805-4034. And you can inquire about a possible free safe and maybe up to 10K in silver. This is a very interesting offer. And Paul, we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But again, protect yourself with tangible assets, something that nobody can kind of change with a flick of a paper, or printing up extra money can affect the value of a dollar and make it worse. But if you have some tangible metals like gold and silver in your portfolio somewhere along the line, you have a lot of major protection. And I think that's something important to discuss with Paul and Colonial Metals Group. So once again, log on to colonialmetalsgroup.com /Ed-Henry. That's colonialmetalsgroup.com/Ed-Henry, 800-805-4034. How about that?
Thank you for mentioning that.
There you go.
Yeah.
So let's talk about something else here. We talked about the government spending. We talked about FEMA. We talked about all of this. We talked about gold and silver. I want to get your thoughts on let's talk about the relationship between the Federal Reserve and precious metals, because the Federal Reserve is now, or at least during election season, they cut down the interest rate half a point. They keep saying they're trying to battle inflation. It's not working. Prices are going to go up, and we're also going to see a dock workers strike possibly in January, because this is not settled. The can was kicked down the road. That could also raise prices when the supply chain has some issues. Why are precious metals important in that kind of time?
When I said if there's 100 people that would like gold and you have 100 ounces of gold, the price will be, let's just call it $20 an ounce, right? And then all of a sudden you have 1,000 people that would like some gold, but there's still only 100 ounces of gold because it's really hard to find, right? So now maybe gold is $100 an ounce. Same thing for any commodity. But when we look back to 1971, which is when this all changed, when Nixon said we will no longer, he essentially said, we will no longer have any limits on the government's need to create money. There will not be a limit any longer. That's what removing the gold standard did. That's like farming and letting your cattle and your horses just roam free. You tore down all the fences. There's no more fence. There's no corral. They're all over the place. Wherever they go, they get to go. And you have to run after them and track them down if you want to find them. Nothing's organized anymore. It becomes very disorganized. And so when you look at 1971 to today, our population has grown by 40%. So if we had 100 people in the line for, a bank loan, well, now we have 140. That doesn't seem hard to accommodate. So it couldn't be our population growing that's caused this inflation, because that would cause, we have all these people that need oranges, and all these people that need eggs, and all these people that need gas. 40% over 53 years. That's not crushing. So how could all of this inflation have come about? There's two parts to inflation. There's the consumer, the human being that's demanding a good, and then there's money. So by the government printing money to solve what it thought would be our problems, they armed people with more capital to chase limited commodities in a way the economy couldn't be aware of, because the economy can be aware of population increases, but it can't be aware of the intentions of a government in a world we've never had before in humanity, in the human race, where governments just create money out of thin air. So as they see more and more and bigger and more troublesome problems and create more and more trillions of dollars out of thin air, then eggs and coffee and wheat and sugar and gasoline, all those commodities are being chased after by an increased demand. So the price goes higher. So now they need to give away Kamala is going to give away $3 trillion for a while to help ease the pain temporarily of the government's price increase creation program. So gold is also a commodity. So silver, right? So they're also going higher with the cost of other things. And when you look back to when the real trouble began, that wrecked this little charade from being discovered, from being hidden. It was when the baby boomers retire in 97. So now you miss this giant economic creation side from 60 million workers leaving the workforce at peak earnings. And they also then go on the cost side. So productivity goes down, costs go up. The government says, well, we don't have enough money to cover the cost for America Incorporated for the year, so we'll have to print. At that time, it was from that time, the stock market is up around 5,000%. The Dow Jones, the 30 greatest companies in the world, perhaps, is up 5,000%, and gold's up 8,000%. Why is that important? Well, because gold isn't something really anyone wants. So if they're having to acquire it and the price is going higher, it must be that more and more folks and investors and parties to the financial world are recognizing this erosion that's going on beneath our feet, and they're relocating capital to something that history says they can't lose when they're in gold and silver. They can't lose that money. It's their personal financial property. And so gold has just been going higher and higher and higher as this erosion has gotten worse.
And that's important to note here. And another thing, we only have a couple of minutes left, Paul, and I want to get your thoughts. Just a quick thought on this. I love talking to you about BRICS, so I want to stick my obligatory BRICS comment and question in here as well. We're looking at election season coming up. We're looking at the American economists are yapping on about whose plan is better and whose plan is worse. But the fact is, we're battling a global de-dollarization movement. Not only battling the fact that our government's overspending and creating too much, or at least trying to find ways to spend too much money and devalue the dollar ourselves, but we have a worldwide movement that involves Russia and China, two heavily adversarial nations that are trying to devalue the dollar. And this is where I also believe precious metals come in very handy, but very important as well. But again, your thoughts on how both of these two candidates for president, and hopefully the parties when they run into Congress, need to focus on quelling that de-dollarization attempt and the upcoming BRICS currency, if they can at this point.
Yeah, that genie's out of the bottle, in my opinion, and that's an opinion.
That's what I thought.
It's not a crystal ball accurate projection. But here's the true way of looking at that. Our government is devaluing our dollar. And that causes not only our commodity prices to go higher, but theirs too, because it's still all priced in our dollar. It's one system in that regard. Reserve currency means your currency is what commodities are priced in. So if our government prints money out of thin air and commodity prices are going higher for us, they're also going higher for every other country on the planet. So you have, let's call it, 200 countries that are done and pissed off and just sick of it dealing with our lunacy coming out of Washington here for the last 30 years, especially. So they're leaving. They're going to create a system where they don't have to deal with our stupid dollar anymore. So we're not battling anything because there's no way to fight it other than stop printing and then what? Give away gifts? So would we give away timber harvesting contracts and give away mining contracts and give away corn and give away wheat? We just start giving that stuff away. You can't have something for nothing. This is the worst part of how a government would ever manage your finances. that consciousness won't ever sink into their minds, evidenced by the decision making in our government and many others before us. So as these countries develop a system to get away from our humongous dominance and the wreckage that our government creates around the world, of course they're leaving. Of course they're leaving. And by them leaving eventually helps collapse our currency. We don't get to leave. Can you use Canadian dollars here in America?
Well,
And
we
I
try to slip in those quarters sometimes, but
I know
that never
crypto
works.
is such a great invention. Can you use it to buy a Jeep? Can you mortgage a home? No, those don't have any purpose in our lives either as money to acquire things. You still have to come out of Bitcoin into the dollar.
Yeah.
To go buy stuff.
Virtual to
Incredible.
tangible, and that's what you
So
need.
we
Still need
can't get
tangible.
out of the dollar and we can't get away from the government. So we have to look at what can we change about our lives to insulate ourselves from the troubles that history says are bound to come and likely around the corner. The dollar's only worth 3 cents. So by printing money, they're killing the dollar by 2 cents average every year since the year 2000. So not much time mathematically kind of seems to be left for this process to continue. And the rest of the countries around the world joining, BRICS is, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and new members, Saudi Arabia. So you have massive population bases in India and China. You have massive energy producing countries in Russia and Saudi Arabia. That's a easy challenge to knock us over at some point.
Yeah, and again, adding all of these other countries, or at least even some of them, we talked about this before. They could technically control a lot of the natural
That's
resources around
incredible.
the world.
Yeah.
We're talking about
Oh,
oil and rare
Yeah.
earth, everything.
Saudi
So,
Arabia. You got me at Saudi Arabia.
well, look at some of the other nations that are trying to pull in as well.
Yeah.
You're talking about a lot of
Wild.
the energy rich nations in Africa and Central Asia. This is going to be
Mhm.
if we don't challenge this, or if our economy does not get stronger and the government is not mindful of all of this, this could be a disaster in the future. Paul, again, you hit it out of the park as always, and we're looking forward to having you next week. And I want to thank you for being here. Once again, Colonial Metals Group. That's colonialmetalsgroup.com/ed-henry. That's colonialmetalsgroup.com/ed-henry right here on, and you can check that out anytime. That's I'll actually pull that up again. That'll be really nice. You can see Ed's smiling face here, which is pretty cool. You'll learn more
There you
about
go. We all miss him. I saw him
Yep.
this morning on Locals for those
Yeah.
of us that follow the Locals chat, but always miss Ed.
And in
There he is.
fact, you can call Colonial Metals Group, talk to Paul or somebody there at 800-805-4034, 800-805-4034. And again, the website, the phone number, it's all there. And Paul, you're here with us every week to bring your insights to what's going on around the world, what's going around the country, and yes, what's going on economically. So we really appreciate you being here every week, and we're looking forward to having you and Karen here next week.
Yeah.
See you next
I
Tuesday,
appreciate
guys.
being here as well.
Karen,
Thanks
thank
for
you
having
very
me.
much. I'll see you next Tuesday. And of course, you'll always be on the chat with us. Paul, thank you.
Yes.
And we're going to have Tony here with us tomorrow. We also have Joel Gilbert. He's a documentarian, and he did 2 very interesting documentaries very recently. One called Arrested by Kamala, A Black Mother's Story, where Kamala Harris's truancy policy wound up throwing a nice lady in jail who's basically her policy was to prosecute or persecute, I will say, I love the dog, parents of kids who didn't show up for school. And that was the whole thing. So this woman was thrown in jail because her daughter couldn't go, even though she had anemia. The long story about that. Then, of course, his other documentary, the Climate According to AI Al Gore, which is going to be really interesting as as Joel uncovers a lot more of the climate change alarmism. So that'll be fun. Again, thank you all for being with us, Patriots. What's the dog's name?
This is Iggy.
Iggy. Oh,
Iggy.
This is
Iggy.
Iggy. The other one's
Welcome,
Gigi.
Iggy.
Iggy and
Oh.
Gigi.
that's cute. I got to bring Teddy on, but he'll go a little
You
crazy.
should.
Thank you all for being on with us. Wake Up Patriots,
Bye.
and we're with us tomorrow. Tony's with us tomorrow as well.